And here we are for the Plainfield Planning Commission meeting on July 7th, 2025. We always start the meeting with a motion to approve the minutes of the last meeting, so we can have that motion.
I
Yeah,
can make.
I
Okay,
know.
okay, and a second? You got a second? Oh, go ahead, Jesse, you can second. Yep.
Oh, I thought you made the motion.
Yeah, yeah. So we'll give you a second. And any discussion on the minutes? I got them out and mailed them this time easily. Okay, all those in favor?
Yeah,
Okay, the motion's approved. So we really have two and another item to discuss on the agenda. And did everyone get a chance to read through Sandy Vitsom put a version of the adopted zoning with the suggested subdivision changes where she had the definition of an applicant, which we already did, but she replaced it all. I think it was done, but it really, the basic thing, she defined plat and sketch plan and then deleted most of the components on a minor subdivision, on the major subdivision of the preliminary review. So the ultimate uh, end result of that is that the subdivision review will just go through one one component where there's a sketch plan review or a preliminary review and then the full review. So it just cuts down a series of reviews. So that's the proposal. Everybody hopefully got a chance to look at it, and so I'm going to open it up for comments. I think Karen had some concern about a really simple administrative review for like a two-lot or a real simple three-lot subdivision. And part of the goal of this is to keep the workload of the DRB um, and the time it takes to do these procedures lower. So Karen, did you get a chance to review it?
Right. My brain is just right.
Oh, okay.
Overheated. um, I've been under a lot of pressure recently from a variety of different entities to really reduce conditional use, um, historic site plan review, subdivision review, to make it a shorter, easier process. And so I'm feeling that we need to be really careful when we try to shorten the process and sort of keep the general public kind of not involved.
Well, I don't think we want
So
to
I've
keep them
kind
not
of
involved
can,
because you still have to mail out all the notices under the single review process. Everybody gets the notification.
except that would only, if I understand right, with Sandy's proposal, Sandy's proposal basically eliminates the preliminary plat review.
Yeah.
So what that does is it means that there's only one warned meeting that the neighbors are, uh, get the notice and everything.
Right.
And what I wondered was, I agree that the 7.5 month timeline seems pretty long to me.
Well, that's if everything goes to the absolute limit
Right.
of, yeah.
Right. But when I looked at it, it seemed like the sketch plan review and the preliminary plat review were largely redundant, except for the warning. So what I wondered whether in the spirit of what Karen was saying and people being involved is if you would write in that the sketch plan review also had to be warned and neighbors noticed
Yeah,
and all of, because it seemed like that would, then there would be two times the, at the sketch plan review and the final plat review that the, neighbors would be, have the ability to know beforehand and the time in between those two things to think it through and whatever. But it seemed to me like that might be a good way to streamline, but also,
yeah. So
uh,
you're thinking that the sketch plan review gets the neighbor's notification at the first go round, and then also now usually what happens, Karen, is when the you don't warn, you don't have to send the butters notifications for both sets of hearings. Once you send a butters one set of notifications, then they are notified and you continue the hearing. Or do you send two notifications to the butters on a major? Oh, you're muted, Karen.
And everything's being really choppy, so it's hard to understand you guys. Yes, if it's continued, you don't have to rewarn, but this would at least, his suggestion would at least allow neighbors input sooner
Right.
than later, because if we skip that middle one, that's lots of times when after the sketch plan people think, and then they want more information, and then they whatever. So I think that a solution would be what Dave was saying, is like we warn the sketch plan like a regular public hearing,
mm-hmm.
and then maybe not have the preliminary and go to the final.
Sure, that makes sense.
I think that would be a solution that makes it better for everyone.
Sure. Okay. I can adjust that change. I think that it's reasonable, because that also means that the you don't send out two sets of neighbor notifications. You just send out the one and then continue the hearing. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So yeah, good
Yes.
idea. Absolutely. So I will try, I'll make that modification in the draft. Does everyone, oh, is,
the email that you sent where you talk about the additional agenda item for Monday's meeting,
yes.
There's no attachment or anything.
I may not have. Well, yeah. I probably just forgot to do that. Well, let's stay on to the subdivision section, and then we'll get to that.
Where's the subdivision stuff?
Didn't I send you I'm pretty sure I emailed everyone the copy of the revised zoning with the changes that Sandy Bitsum incorporated into that draft.
When would that have been?
Oh gosh, you got that, didn't you, David?
yeah, it was June 20th. June 20th, and yeah, everybody on the design review got it, all, and us and Sandy and Peter Youngbear.
Do you see? Did that got lost?
Is it the one with Nikki Sabato email below?
No, I don't think so.
Here we go.
Now that should have a Word document that's the adopted zoning with the suggested changing. They're mostly strikeouts, strikeouts and replacements and strikeouts.
Right.
Okay. So I was thinking that what I would do, not this week, but early next week, is make a clean copy without the strikeouts. It's just a little easier to read, but we'll post the ones with the strikeouts. But so far, the suggestion of making the neighbor notification during the sketch plan review makes a lot of sense.
And then it would be warned as a hearing.
Yes, it would be warned
I
as a
don't-
hearing. Anyway, the DRB, they only meet once a month,
Oh,
and
anyway,
then as
okay.
and they would warn the sketch plan review for such and such. But that's not really the same as notifying all the abutters.
Right, right.
Yeah, not everybody looks at all the warnings in the paper and on the website. So we try to keep that.
I mean, the only thing I see there is my sense from Frank Mitchell's sketch plan review was that because it's not like a formal plat review, it's a lot looser. Like the sketch plan review, the requirements for it, a person could be more like. My sense was that the sketch plan review was really intended to give an applicant the opportunity to like have a fairly open-ended conversation with the development review board so that they could then build a more thorough application. And I just wonder if the warning that, I guess if you warn the sketch plan review, then it kind of puts people on notice to keep an eye out for the eventual hearing in which they would still be a part of it.
Right.
So, yeah.
And if you were a butter to Frank and you didn't know he was thinking of doing what he planning on doing, and then all of a sudden, it's one advantage is to keep an informal discussion, and if all the neighbors are there, it doesn't have the same flexibility as if it was just the applicant and the DRB. But it seems like if someone's, if you're going to have interested or abutting neighbors be involved in the conversation, you might as well hear what their thoughts might be early on in the process versus later on in the process.
Yeah.
That was my thinking. The other thing I noticed, which I don't know if there were documents that I didn't see regarding Frank Mitchell's
There are no documents.
sketch plan, but the sketch plan submission requirements are actually pretty thorough. And honestly, I think the meeting where a sketch plan was submitted for the East Hill also, I don't think neither Frank Mitchell's nor the East Hill one came anywhere close to meeting the submission, but section 5.7 sketch plan submission requirements, at least what I saw, which may not have been, I only saw what was posted online. But one of the reasons I was comfortable feeling like there didn't need to be a preliminary plat was because the sketch plan really includes all the same stuff.
It should be, yeah.
And so, yeah.
And I think
So for
I
Frank,
don't want
Go
to
ahead, Karen.
read.
Let Karen, she sort of jumped in earlier.
I can never figure out how to raise my hand.
Yeah.
So with Frank Mitchell's, it was actually for your information. Like this is what he's thinking about doing. It wasn't really a sketch plan review. Okay, because so that doesn't fit into that criteria. And yes, I agree that if we're going to go to this two-step process, that we need a more complete check all the boxes on the subdivision for the sketch plan review. And that would be a change in how we've sort of been operating from an informal, more formal, real formal. So yeah, it would require the sketch plan review to be more complete.
Mm-hmm. Did you read through the criteria of the sketch plan review in Sandy's amended draft? Did you think that was adequate enough or too detailed for that? Because it's basically saying the first review is basically as thorough as the secondary review existing now, so.
I'm a little confused about what document has Sandy's. It's the one, it's the one that's labeled subdivision edits. But
I believe
I
so.
didn't, I guess I can't tell what are the edits.
They should be in color.
Oh, hmm.
Oh, it looks like Sandy suggested eliminating basically all of the requirements of the sketch plan.
The preliminary one.
Right.
And so we just have one sketch plan review.
Right, but it looks like it struck all of the requirements for what it should contain, other than the name and address, name of the abutting property owners, and that they should attend the meeting to discuss the requirements of the subdivision regulations.
Right, and then the next review level is the the plan review with all the details. So you,
Right.
in Frank's case, you could have an informal meeting, and then he has to submit a sketch plan review that gets a butter notification, and at that point, the neighbors are involved if they want to be.
But unless I'm misunderstanding something, I thought we were just talking about the sketch plan having fairly detailed requirements. And
Yes.
it looks like Sandy is suggesting taking out all the detailed requirements.
Yeah, in the sketch plan, but then there is another review level.
Well,
Right.
I'm having a hard time seeing the
Yeah.
document has these changes.
Yeah,
So
it is.
if Sandy's amended thing does not have section 5.7 sketch plan submission requirements?
Yeah, I'd have to go back and look at it. I don't have it. I have it on my computer, but not on the upstream. That's
Yeah.
why I was thinking,
Because that's critical. I think that's
Yeah.
what Jesse's saying, that, and
Yeah.
as written, I don't know if she's edited that at all, but if that has been significantly edited, then I wouldn't be comfortable with
okay,
the
okay.
preliminary plat.
Sketch plan. Maybe I'm misreading I was looking at 5.2.5.3, which says sketch plan reviews.
Yeah, keep scroll down
Yeah,
and look for 5.7.
yeah, okay, I see 5.7. Okay, so that does include a lot more of the details. Sorry,
So
I don't mean to have a
No.
detailed discussion about something that I haven't read thoroughly.
Even if you've read it thoroughly, it's still a little confusing.
It's hard. Yeah, I don't have anything in red or crossed
Okay,
out or
you don't have any colors. Because
No.
yeah, 5.7 is still in there. It's just called a sketch plan submission requirements. And so it's been
Yeah.
relabeled as sketch plan application. So all those A through R requirements are still in there on the review
I
level.
see what it is.
right.
I think it's that she renamed maybe the preliminary plat.
Yes. Yes.
And that's why struck all of the sketch plan requirements, because
Yes.
she's essentially.
Well,
So
I
there
think
needs
she
to be a
just
little
deleted
defining-
the preliminary plat.
Yes. And
That's
it
what it
becomes,
looks like to me.
yeah, but all the requirements are still there in the final review.
And they're in the sketch plan review too.
Yeah.
That doesn't,
Yeah.
the requirements, as far as I could see, didn't change. Even in the old version, the sketch plan was what set out all the requirements, and then it said in the preliminary plat and the final plat that everything had to conform to the original sketch plan application, except if the design review committee said you have to do this and this and this to complete the plan. At least that's how I read it. I don't know.
Yeah, that's where the difficulty is that, I mean, the thing is, once you submit it, you've submitted it essentially. So why not expedite the process and say, this is what it is until the DRB needs to find changes? So what I was thinking of doing is making a clean copy without the the strike-throughs, and it's a little easier to interpret.
Yeah,
But
that
the-
makes sense. I think you have to do some renumbering of these sections because some
Yeah,
of them
yeah,
get
because it's less confusing. But we will, when we post it for it'll have to go through the hearing process. We'll have both copies, like we did before. One with strike-throughs, so people can see what we've taken out and made changes to, and one that you can read and make a little easier sense out of.
Right, and because that, and the one that it now says subdivision edits SV, mine doesn't have any strike-throughs. I
Okay,
can't,
well,
so I
yeah,
can't tell what's been edited and what's
oh,
not.
okay. But part of it has to do with the different kind of word programs that are
That
out
could
there.
be, I'm just looking
Yep.
at it on my,
Oh, you know,
Yeah.
if you chose, if you there's a view changes tab in Word
Oh,
that
yeah.
would show those.
Okay, so I'll look at it again on Julie's computer where I can,
Yeah,
no,
because
no, no,
sometimes,
I'll look at it, when I get home, I'll look at it.
right, yeah. A lot of times when a Word document gets sent out with strike-throughs or edits, um, the your view in Word can either show those edits or show the clean copy.
Okay,
And that's why it gets really confusing. So what I try to do is post and send out one that says it has the strike throughs and one that doesn't have it, so you don't have to choose. And your program should see both. It's still confusing, but that's what that was. If everybody feels comfortable with at least moving forward with the major concept as this, then I'll go
Yes.
ahead and do that.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
okay,
So the other, I think David sent out a note about the slopes, and he researched Marshfield's slope requirements for zoning, and I'll just let him speak a little bit about his what he found and what I thought was like a good way to go ahead and do it, and especially since if that's what Marshfield's doing, we should be able to make it work too.
yeah, I mean, from my experience, 10 degree, 10% is pretty restricting, without any conditions, to 10% would be pretty tough to build built into a hill. You could do it, but you'd probably have to have retaining walls and the like. So I checked Marshfield. We've worked there a lot, and I've had to get reviews on slope, and I thought uh, uh, their regulations were pretty reasonable. And I added to theirs that 20 to 25% would require licensed engineer approval. And up to 20%, well, up to where does it go? Up to conditional use, up to 15% would be permitted. From 15 to 25 would be conditional use, and from 20 to 25 would also require an engineer to sign off or whatever.
I wonder, does it make sense just to say, up to 15 is permitted, 15 to 25 is with an engineer?
Fine with me.
Yeah, it'd be a little safer. We've already loosened up the slope requirement for what's permitted, and 15 to 25 is not unreasonable. Otherwise we have, instead of 2 levels, we have 3.
So, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, well, and it becomes like, where is the slope and average slope? So it would be a bigger window between 15 to 25 would include the licensed engineer.
And it wouldn't be conditional use. It would either be an engineer would sign off or not.
Yeah, yes.
I guess that makes sense because the engineer is going to be more discerning than conditional use approval.
Well,
Anyway.
the conditional use would
qualified.
be contingent on the licensed engineer
Yeah.
design.
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And is the
Oh,
does the
Karen,
language
were you,
Yeah, I'm thinking.
okay, okay, so go ahead, Jesse.
Oh, wait,
Karen's
I
thinking,
turn my light on so I have my halo.
okay.
Where's the raise your hand button on this?
You could just raise your hand. You could
I
just
don't
like a wave, you know? It's down there on the bottom.
So why couldn't it be permitted use with the engineer's report and just the zoning administrator versus having to go
Oh,
through
okay.
the conditional use?
Conditions. Okay, as the zoning administrator, you think that would work?
Well, what is the DRB going to say?
Yeah.
Your engineer doesn't.
Yeah.
You know what
I guess,
mean?
I guess the idea is that the conditional use is always that next level of review, but you can review that administratively. So anything above 15, the zoning administrator needs to see the engineering and determines that it's a licensed engineer, and we'll go with that. That's not unreasonable because it does cut down on the amount of time the DRB has to spend on every conditional use we can think of sending them. How about that, David? You good with that?
yeah. I
Okay.
think that works fine for me, you know.
Yeah, we just have the threshold where we call in expertise. And that can be, there's no, that might not necessarily be a need for the DRB to review that when the zoning administrator can do that administratively. Okay,
and are we
so
talking about if any of the footprint of the building falls within a slope over 15%, or are we talking about something that, how do you define that?
I think part of the if the part of the building is on 15% and the other is less, it's the 15% that triggers the concern.
So if
'Cause
you could keep your building footprint just outside of that 15%, you'd be
Sure.
fine. But if
Yeah,
the corner of it snuck into it,
right, because the stability of the slope is what the concern is. So it might make somebody want to just move the building where the slope is flatter, which is probably a good idea. But we don't.
Right.
There's so many possibilities of siting and trees and slopes and shade and views and all that stuff. But the concern to the town is the stability of the building on a steep slope. So if part of the building is on a steep slope, then it's a concern. But at the moment, we're saying you shouldn't build on 10%, which is just not a. It's just not. In my mind, it needs to be a little more loose than that. So I'll see if I can come up with some language that does the administrative review process and send that out. I probably won't embed it into the zoning, but I'll embed it as a separate item. I'll see how that works. And then the other item that Sandy Vitzum has brought up, and it has to do with the village expansion project and how tiny homes and how dense housing gets permitted, but more importantly, is eligible for financing. Is that our setbacks for a building the only way you can have a townhouse in our zoning is with a condominium style ownership, because we have 5-foot setbacks. If we had 0 degree setback only in a PUD, that so be reviewed by the DRB, that a person can wholly own that side of the townhouse and get FHA financing for that side of that townhouse, even though it's attached. And apparently, at the moment, you can't get individual ownership of a townhouse. You can't get commercial financing for that. And
Oh,
because
that's not the case.
okay,
Sorry.
okay,
Because we have, at the New Hamburger, we have a duplex
okay,
and we sold one half of it and got financing no problem, or the person who was buying it Not
Okay,
finance, no problem. Not FHA financing. I think
okay.
and the other part, I'll just say, you might be able to answer the question. It had to do with no HOA.
Yes. Do you have an HOA?
We do, and
Well, there
I'm
you
an
go.
advocate, so
Okay. Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
not
sure. Okay.
sure. I'm not sure how you ha I'm not sure. Uh, my experience, which is not, it's limited to an 8 unit PUD, so it's different than
Yep.
uh, however many unit, is that you need a facility for homeowners or residents or whatever form you have to have agreements among themselves of how you, um, like for example, our duplex, there's common elements of the duplex. There's a whole um, uh, structure of how the two sides of the duplex relate to each other and who's responsible for what and what the remedies are if there's problems. And uh, in our case, there's shared roof systems and things like that. It wouldn't necessarily be true for something new, but so and for us, the HOA works great because we designed the HOA. We made the bylaws and everybody feels good about them and it gives us a way of talking to each other. I don't see how you could have either tiny houses in really close proximity or duplexes, townhouses, and that type of building without having some agreements between the owners. Um, the FHA financing is slightly different. It's not wholly different as I understand it. Um, FHA, I think, uh, FHA will give loans for duplexes and townhouses, but if I understand it right, they will only do one loan. So the co-owners of the duplex have to have the same loan.
Uh-huh.
And I
Yeah.
see where that could be, kind of an issue. But on the other hand, I don't see how you could have buildings like that and not have an HOA or some structure of agreement between the co-owners. Um, so I don't know. It's confusing to me.
Okay, well, that's a legitimate concern. So this was just the first time we discussed this, so we'll put that on the table for needs further discussion. Clearly needs more research. I know Sandy's concern was that the you could get a loan on a townhouse for ownership, but it would be more expensive than the lowest possible financing. And I'll, I'll just we don't know the answer. She just brought that up, and so I'm bringing it up. And clearly, the ownership on I wouldn't want to own a half a building with no agreement with the other half.
Right.
Uh,
And I mean, there's
yeah,
common walls
yeah,
and all
yeah,
that stuff.
yeah.
Uh,
But
for me, I don't quite I mean, there's things I don't understand about, obviously the East Hill thing is still evolving,
very
but,
much.
um, but, uh, the altogether, the PUD with no HOA, I think I have heard it said, oh, no, we're not going to have an HOA under any, um, circumstances, and I'm quite skeptical of that because there's so many things uh, that happen in a tight community like that. Um, I don't think it would be exactly like the village, the existing village, in terms of independent households and that kind of thing. So it needs to be thought through.
I
Uh,
guess when this conversation came up in an earlier meeting that we had a number of months ago, my sense was that what they were trying to make room for that made sense to me because it's something that I have seen in an urban setting is the townhouses that are essentially separated by a firewall that is, whether it's two firewalls that touch each other or it's a single firewall that goes all the way up and above the roof level, and essentially lets two townhouses just get built right on the property line. And therefore there is really no need for a shared anything, whether yard, property, or structure, because that firewall kind of effectively partitions them. And my sense was just the idea that you would be able to buy and sell essentially a townhouse. And
David, I
so
think
I think
David's
that's what
still
we're trying to
skeptical.
provide for.
Yeah.
I'm skeptical that I think that any community will do better if there's agreements when things are so close and tight, and parking and, you know, whatever. Who can, you walk over other people's lawns? What happened if you don't? And we certainly don't want the town to get involved in dealing with stuff like that. So, I mean, I'll admit I'm skeptical of the whole combination PUD subdivision. But that's a whole nother matter. Like, I'd rather see one or the other, and if it's a PUD, I'd prefer to see one big lot, but that's neither here nor there. That's not on the table right now, so it doesn't matter.
Right. Okay. Well, let's. I think there are valid points of discussion that we can look into. There are these. If you go out on the recreation path, or the path where the mountain bike trails are, in Montpelier, you come out on them and you go past these townhouses that are laid out next to each other. I think they're rental units, but I don't know. But I'd like to, get some other ideas. What's existing out there, because one of the things about HOAs is they have a reputation of being really restrictive. And I think that East Village wants to be a little looser than that. But you could certainly have.
It's up to whoever does the HOA.
Right. Yeah. Well, I'm just talking about the general restrictions of the people hear of HOAs in big neighborhoods, and you can't do a lot of different things. But you can have an agreement on housing and common behavior that it's technically an HOA, but it's a little more. It's a much looser document.
Oh, sure. It's all up to what like we had a lawyer who we loved, and we told him what we wanted, and he did it, and it's in no way restrictive.
But you were all there when you did that. This would be unknown people coming together in unknown ways.
Yep.
So
which makes it both more complicated, but also maybe more necessary, because you don't know what you're going to end up with.
Yeah, it could be more fraught with hazards. So having a basic agreement that they buy into. Where my son lives in Phoenix, he lives next to this street called Comstock Street. And this street at Christmas, every house has about 100,000 lights, and they tune the lights to a rock station. So all the lights flash, and there's traffic for miles. They have police, and it's a crazy thing. And if you buy a house on that street, you have to agree to put your lights up. You can't be the dark one. So there are all kinds of rules.
That sounds like a pretty good model for the East Village expansion. Has to be.
Having a multi-LED lights time to Led Zeppelin pouring through speakers. Yep. It actually pours through your car radio. There's a radio station that plays locally, and you just tune your radio station to that frequency, and you listen to it as you drive through. It's totally wild, but I wouldn't want to live that street for anyone.
Yeah.
Well,
I think I would like it.
Okay, goes on for weeks.
Well, but I have lots and lots of Christmas decorations, so I probably would be okay with.
Okay. We all plumber in
the electric bill.
Yeah. Well, your electric bill goes up in December. Absolutely. Okay, so we've got
off the zoning topic.
Oh, okay. Remember, we're being recorded.
Right. No, I want us to talk sometime about the historic site preservation reviews.
Oh,
I'd
because
like
you
to
had
put
mentioned
that
that
in.
about to try to do it as a global, um, do it administratively. If there's no change to the historic building, do we need a DRB review if there's no change?
Right, like for yeah, like we have to do a historic site review for the granary, which is the old co-op, because it's a historic building, but there's no change to the external.
So once again, you're suggesting that can, if there's no change, it can be done
To the external,
administratively.
yes.
Yeah, because that's all you would review anyway in a historic site review. You wouldn't care
Right.
what kind
So
of plumbing they put in. They could use PEX and it would be a big deal. They don't have to recreate
but
leaded pipes.
right, like yeah, I mean I just would suggest that we have it for, because it says before I can do any permit, it has to have a historic site review if it's on the registry or something. So, like Travis Hoskins bought One High Street, and he painted it beautiful and everything. And that's not, we don't really get permits for painting, and it doesn't really fit into a historic site review. But
Mhm.
he has to have one for a change of use from an office building to a resident. So
What are the criteria for a historic site review?
it's a lot longer than before.
Yeah, but if we can make those criteria reviewed administratively, it would be once again a step in expediting
Right.
the permitting process in the town.
I think if they're going to do something external, then they definitely need to go through the DRB review.
Okay, but if there's no external change,
right,
okay,
Including paint color? Including paint color, Karen?
well, painting color, you don't come in for see, you only trigger a historic site review if you come in for a permit. You only trigger a permit
Okay.
if or different reasons. So he's not, he didn't have to, there's no reason why he can't paint it whatever color he wants, because there's no permitting process that requires him to get agreement. And I think that's one of the things that why the expansion doesn't want to have one of those homeowners associations, because they don't want to deal with colors of you only can paint this and you can only have that. I think,
But
and that's, I think, doesn't have to be that way. It just, some people feel.
yeah, the HOA can be whatever you want it to be. So,
Right.
in our case, there were certain things that was important to us. None of them had anything to do with what a house looks like or what color it is or who can go where, when, or anything like that. It was mostly, in our case, it was about how we talk to each other if there's something, if somebody has an issue or a problem or something like that. But it's just, you have an HOA, it has bylaws, and the bylaws can be super simple, and it just, yeah, I already said what I thought.
yeah,
Right. So, I mean, I think we should think about what we're really looking for a historic site plan review. Like, what are we trying to accomplish? Because so many of our houses never went through a historic site plan review. So a lot of them don't even look like what they do in the historic registry.
most of them don't. Yeah.
Right. So, so when the guy beside Positive Pie wanted to change the slope of the roof, right, on the porch because it was draining into something, we had a historic site review where we had to discuss the change of a slope of a roof, and then we also talked about windows. But ultimately, in order for that house to be safe and not rotting, it needed a different roof line. Like, did it really change the brick house that much? Not really. But I don't know. I guess the thing is, why do we have this regulation, and what's the purpose? And I don't,
Well,
Just-
yeah, in terms of your suggestion of no external changes to building could be administrative reviewed, I think that's a reasonable,
Right.
something to think about. And then whether you can change your roof. Well, apparently in Vermont, in Plainfield, you can change the roof if you need to save the building. And that's probably a good thing.
Oh, started to rain.
Oh, yep, little rain coming. Okay, does Charles? You've attended the meeting. You've stayed quiet. Do you have any comments?
One moment while I try to
Okay,
turn up my video. I hate
there you go.
Thank you. Thank you. I have to acknowledge that I'm the Goddard College alumnus who is probably the persistent nuisance when it comes to asking questions about Goddard College, but it probably goes back to what we learned back then. But I try to tune in to see if there's anything that relates to either the planning process or the zoning process as it's going to relate to campus, because my two questions, basically to the town, and this may not be the appropriate venue, is just, is what they're doing in terms of the current activities and commercial operations, are any of those subject to conditional use approvals? And if so, have they submitted those proposals, and what kind of public feedback have they gotten? So just, I know there's a lot of activity. I know there's a lot of negotiation. So I'm just curious, sort of, with all the things that are happening, what kinds of planning commission or development review board, will be involved, and, or if that's already been taken care of, because.
Karen probably is
So they
more
put
in
it-
tune with that.
So they put in two permits, and they wanted me to do sort of a blanket permit where I established, what was conditional use and what was not. And I'm like, no, I'm not going to do a blanket. I'm not doing blanket permits. Basically I sent it back incomplete because I didn't have a good site plan. And I also listed all the buildings and what they were going to say, if they were going to use it for non-residential or residential. I told them which ones were on the historic site review. I also said, I want you to tell me what Goddard used it for and what you're proposing to use it for. And they are moving at a snail's pace. But I hope they seem to have gone with my idea that we'll permit each building separately. But, we're still working on how we're going to get through that process, because there's Goddard SPE LLC, there's Executive Suite LLC, there's like there's all these different organizations that are tied into one somehow. So, I'm working at it, but it's a slow go. But I think the idea is like the Hay Barn Museum, because it's always Hay Barn Theater has always been for Hay Barn Theater, that the use that Goddard did, they would permit for it to be a similar situation. That's what my hope is. And I'm hoping what they're thinking, that come in and get all the buildings. We would look at what the past use was. So
For example,
I'm working it, but
for example, in reading the new zoning ordinance, conditional uses would be an event venue. I think that's actually the term. So my question was, if they have a 3-day Shakespeare festival where there's lots of public, it's an event, there's activity in the Hay Barn, but they're also doing lodging and restaurant, does that qualify as an event venue? And if so, do they need approval before they proceed with that activity or not? I have some alumni friends who want to have a reunion, and they're negotiating with the Creative Campus, Sabrina Brown, for an October reunion, which would be restaurant, dining facilities, overnight lodging. But one of the questions they had of me, having attended some of these meetings, is overnight lodging, event venue, dormitory, short-term rentals. Those are all conditional uses. And would the campus have the approval of those uses before October so that the alumni group could be sure that they would be able to have their reunion with lodging and restaurant and activities and events? So that's also a tangible part of my question, is that there's both activities now and activities planned that would seem to be part of the conditional use part of the zoning. So I'm just wondering if all of that's been approved up to date. So, for example, the August Shakespeare Festival, is qualified, and then, or will they need some approvals, or would an alumni event with lodging and dining and public event venue require conditional use approval, and will that be available by September when my friends want to have this alumni reunion? So that's the question. I just see lots of activity, but I hadn't seen any of the permitting process. Apologies for the length.
No. Ultimately, they do need permits for all this stuff.
So if you see Sabrina, tell her to get the stuff back to Karen quick.
Well,
so I'm working with Tim Zuber, but yeah, we're in the we're in the process of trying to get all these things permitted. I don't see the town at this point in time pursuing shutting them down.
Right. No, I understand. I mean, I certainly want to see both the campus successful and have a beneficial effect on Plainfield, since, there's such a historic link between the two. I'd like to see both thrive.
They're in a little bit of a limbo state right now, because it used to be an academic institution that was therefore allowed to do a bunch of different things within it. And now it's no longer functionally an academic institution. It's a piece of private property. And so what Karen is asking is for them to kind of permit all the individual uses. And in the meantime, there's no mechanism to shut them down, but they need to move towards those permits.
Right. Okay. Because as I say, the tangible part of my question was, I know these friends of mine, fellow alumni, are interested in an event, but they're saying, we don't want to enter or try to have an event if it's not going to be legal. And it's July, August, September, 3 months away. And if restaurant and event venue and lodging, overnight lodging for 3 days isn't permitted by then, maybe we, shouldn't do that right now. And then I see, though, that they do have an August Shakespeare Festival, which has restaurant and lodging and, things seem like that's part of the conditional use. So not trying to be a troublemaker. I'm just pursuing this lifelong learning that Goddard supposedly taught us.
Yeah, and they still have a little bit of educational panache going on. So it's getting a kind of a gray area. But as Jesse and Karen said, if all they need to do is get their ducks in a row and submit it to the town, no one's going to come marching through and saying, turn out the lights on the Hayworth.
Right.
Yeah, and they're moving that way. But if you do speak to them occasionally, just say, "Hey, let's get this rolling."
Well, thank you very much. As always, I genuinely appreciate your hospitality and your toleration of my wordiness and rambling. So, but it's always an education, and that's why I try to listen and understand, and hopefully eventually, get back and contribute to the economy.
Great. Okay. Well, thanks. You're catching on. You got the DRB, you got the zoning, got the conditional use. All those terms are important. Okay.
Oh, and the other thing is, I've worked in historic preservation, and I know that whole issue of what was a historic house and what is, and I know we used to use the voluntary guidance of the Secretary of the Interior standards for rehabilitation, which the National Park Service put out, and they're very helpful guidelines on how to look at the rehabilitation and even adaptive reuse of historic properties. It's about 100 pages. They have lots of examples, and they're non-binding, but they do offer some guidance. So if somebody doesn't have a handy copy, They could probably get it from the state or from National Park Service, but I'd recommend it as a good resource for dealing with the touchy questions of used to look like this, now it looks like that. If they want to make this kind of a change, how do we evaluate it? It's called the Secretary of the Interior Standards for the Rehabilitation of Historic Properties.
Oh, okay, thanks. There's something we could probably
Thanks.
need to look into. Okay,
Thank you.
and yeah, thank you. So I'll try to put some stuff together and send it out, and maybe try to do a little research into low impact HOAs. Yeah, we'll call them that. So anybody else have any comments or concerns or suggestion? Okay, I won't get that out till I get back to Vermont. I'm going to enjoy the coast, but I'll try to get the minutes together some point. Okay, we'll try to do a motion to adjourn. Okay,
Thanks, everyone.
okay,
Thanks.
thanks everybody. Thanks for showing up at the office, Jesse. Okay,
Sure.
enjoy your trip back.
Yeah.
Try to stop. Don't make it all in one day.
Yeah. All right.
Okay. Night, everybody.
Good time in Maine.
Okay, thanks.